Dear students, good morning. This is the class for March the 18th, 2020 for CP, the group CP2. So let's start with a quick review. Where were we? Okay. So on Monday, we were talking about floating, the difference between floating a maxim and violating maxims. Okay. We said that floating maxims means that both the hearer and the speaker know that whatever the person is saying should not be taken at face value. Okay, should not be interpreted literally. And I gave you the example of the shop assistant. I'll come later. We all know that when we say something like that, we're probably not going to go to back to the shop. And at the same time, it's the same thing that the shop assistant understands, but politely says. Okay, for instance. We looked at some cases for floating quantity, and more specifically, the technique of hyperbole, where you say, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. We know both the speaker and the hearer understands that they are obviously not going to eat a horse, but that they are very hungry. Same thing happens with metaphors. My house is a refrigerator in January. Of course, it's not an actual refrigerator. It's just very cold. And the same thing happens with irony, the difference between irony and banter. Irony is an apparently friendly way of being offensive. So, oh, how much I love waking up at 4 because of the dog. And the opposite, banter, offensive words to be friendly. Oh, you stupid little guy. What happens when you want to float relation? We said that you say something that is irrelevant, apparently irrelevant. So what do you think about Mark? His flatmate's a wonderful cook. Okay, you're not being relevant, but the other person understands that you're actually not. You don't have an actual positive idea of Mark. Floating manner, like being quite obscure. Because there's a purpose. You want to exclude a third party from understanding what you're saying. Okay? And I gave you the examples of all those times that when there are children around and we don't want them to understand something, we use other words that they don't understand, or we don't mention the thing that we want to do or that we are talking about. What happens with violation of maxims? In this case, there is no, let's say that the hearer will not understand that the words should not be taken at face value. So in the case of a violation of the maximum quantity, we are not giving enough information. Okay, and I gave you the example of does the dog bite? And the other person says no. A bends down and gets bitten. And then eventually B says, that's not my dog. Okay. In that case, the person B is not giving all the information that is required. Or we looked at several cases that are all linked with the same example about a husband and a wife talking about the wife that had bought a new dress. In the case of the violation of the maximum quantity, when the husband says, how much did that new dress cost, darling? She answers, less than the last one. Too little information. If the woman wants to violate the maxim of relation, she could say something like, she can answer, I know, let's go out tonight. Not relevant. If she wants to be obscure and thus violate the maxim of manner, she can say something quite lengthy like, a tiny fraction of my salary, though probably a bigger fraction of the salary of the woman that sold it to me. Okay. So as you can, if you remember on Monday, I had to repeat it. I had to read it twice, read it slowly, because it was quite difficult to understand, to follow. Okay. And that gives you the technique that is used. We also looked at other two forms of non-observance of the maxims of the cooperative principle. One is infringement. when there is an imperfect linguistic performance. So, for instance, with a child or a learner of a new language, they obviously do not know how to cope with these maxims, either floating them or violating them, and they do not know how to actually violate or float them on purpose. Or you can opt out. Say that for ethical, legal reasons, whatever, you cannot satisfy what the person is asking for. I'm afraid I can't give you that information. And then we watched that video about maxims and implicature that we will talk about later on during the course. With that said, for today, we're going to get a little deeper into Bryce's maxims with some examples. By the way, I don't remember if I told you on Monday, but if you don't have the book, don't worry. It's really not a problem. Just follow the slides. I want to give you some other examples about how to float maxims. And at the same time, I invite you to find something that you can remember, okay? An example that makes sense for you to understand the difference between the several types of maxims. So in this case, there is a dialogue, very short dialogue between a teacher and her students, his or her students. And we're talking about a maxim of quality. If you don't remember what it means, go back here. Don't lie or mislead. So the student says, Tehran is in Turkey, isn't it, Professor? And the teacher answers, and London's in Armenia, I suppose. Or another dialogue, where A says, I'm actually a very important person in the government. And that's Charlie. I don't know if you can hear him. B says, yeah, and I'm the Easter Bunny. Of course, in these two cases, and London's in Armenia, I suppose. And yeah, I'm the Easter Bunny. This person, the words that these people are saying should not be interpreted literally. The first one is a joke. The second one is a joke, of course. These people are not actually lying. They are saying something, but they definitely know that the first speaker, A, is not going to take their words at face value. And the reason is also contextual, okay? They know that people know that London is not in Armenia. They know that the Easter Bunny is not a person, okay? Oh, Charlie. Now, a second case, second example, maxim of relevance. Go back to your scheme. Maxim of relevance, or manner, actually. Don't be unclear or ambiguous. Relation. Okay, relevance or relation are the same thing. They actually mean don't be irrelevant. Okay? So again, relevance and relation are the same thing. They both mean don't be irrelevant. A says, I do think Mrs. Jenkins is an old windbag, don't you? And B replies, lovely weather for March, isn't it? Or in the second example, Johnny says, hey Sally, let's play marbles. And Johnny's mother, who is overhearing the conversation, promptly responds, How's your homework getting along, Johnny? In both cases, lovely weather for March, isn't it? Or Johnny's mother saying, how's your homework getting along, Johnny? These two people are saying something that is apparently irrelevant for the conversation. But actually, both A's, both A and Johnny, understand that there is something more behind what B is saying. Lovely weather for March, isn't it? Or how's your homework getting along, Johnny? In the first case, by floating the maxim of relevance, B is saying that probably he or she doesn't want to talk about Mrs. Jenkins, or they agree or disagree. We don't know. Again, a lot of it has to do with context that we've talked about in previous classes. Same thing when how's your homework getting along, Johnny? Also in this case, Johnny's mom is saying, you're not going to play marbles, it's better for you to do your homework. Next case, maxim of manner. Let's go back here. Maxim of manner means don't be unclear, disorderly, ambiguous, and obscure. Okay? Don't be obscure. So one person says, Miss Singer sang an aria from Rigoletto. Or the same person can say, Miss Singer produced a series of sounds corresponding closely to the score of an aria from Rigoletto. Now, first case, pretty clear. Miss Singer is singing an aria from Rigoletto. Full stop, period. In the second case, this person is being quite obscure and misleading because he's not saying that she sang an aria, but she produced a series of sounds corresponding closely to the score of an aria from Rigoletto. What's behind that? Obviously, that Miss Singer isn't a great singer. Okay? So both the speaker and the listener understand that what is being said has something more to it. Last case, I think. Let's see. Yeah. Last case, the maxim of quantity. Don't give too much information or too little information. War is war, or either John will come or he won't. If he does it, he does it. In this case, it looks like apparently we're giving too little information. But actually, we know that what is behind these words is quite obvious, both to the listener and to the speaker. Now, I want to give you further information, further examples for violation of maxims. The first one that we're going to look at is the maxim of quality. Okay? Maxim of quality, don't lie. So a mother that says, "Did you study all day long?" to a son who has been playing all day long. He says, "Yes, I've been studying till now." In this case, the boy is violating a maxim of quality. He is boldly lying. Why is he lying? Because he either fears a punishment or his mom could force him to study again. So the mother cannot know whether her son has been studying or not. Second case, violation of the maxim of quantity. John, where have you been? I searched everywhere for you during the past 3 months. And Mark says, I wasn't around, so what's the big deal? In this case, and remember that the maxim of quantity means don't give too much nor too little information, John is asking a question because he wants a reaction from Mike. But what Mike answers does not satisfy, does not fulfill what John wants to know. He doesn't say where he has been. He just says, plainly simple, I wasn't around. And thus, and therefore, he violates the maxim of quantity. Now, how do you violate the maxim of relevance? Remember that if you violate, that you should not be irrelevant. So the teacher asks, why didn't you do your homework? And the student replies, may I go get some water? I'm so thirsty. In this case, what the student is saying is not relevant at all. The student is not answering the teacher's question. Sorry, okay. So where are we? So in this case, the student is not answering relevantly to his teacher's question. Okay? Maybe this kid wants to avoid whatever the teacher is asking him to do. Then what happens in the violation of the maxim of manner? Okay, being obscure. Sarah says, did you enjoy the party last night? And Anna replies, there was plenty of Oriental food on the table, lots of flowers all over the place, people hanging around, chatting with each other. An obvious answer to Sarah's question would have been yes or no. But in this case, she's describing what she saw, food, the flowers, the people, but she is not answering the question. She's being quite obscure. So this can either mean that Anna was quite happy and so excited about the party And so she wanted to describe all a set of things, and she wasn't really caring about Sarah's initial question. Or that the party was so bad, and she definitely not enjoyed herself. And so she doesn't actually know how to say a no, and she describes other things. So now, looking at the limitations of the cooperative principle. Of course, theory is great, theory is perfect, but it not always applies to everyday life. For instance, looking at the maxim of quantity. In the UK, there's this usage, this habit of always indicating the family relationship, which might be unnecessary. So a British person would say something like, my nephew Paul came last night, instead of just saying Paul came last night, depending on the context. Or another example that I can give you is when American people get angry, they would say the name and the last name of the person they are angry with, even if it's a close relative. Okay? So like, I don't know, somebody would get angry with me, they would say Giuseppina Scotto di Carlo. Pretty long. But that's how American people highlight the fact that they are angry with somebody that belongs to their family. Italians would never do that, okay? Nobody would say my name and last name just to say that they are angry with me, to stress that they are angry with me. And that, in that case, I would be violating the maxim of quantity, because I'm just giving too much information. Second problem. According to some scholars, the maxims, all four maxims, can be basically reduced to the maxim of relation. Whatever you say has to be relevant. Okay? Now you can call it quantity, you can call it quality, you can call it manner. It's all the same thing. Generally speaking, whatever you say has to satisfy the criteria of being relevant. Let me see, let me decide if we can do this today. Yes, it's actually continuing what I introduced. So more on this relevance theory, on these people, on these scholars that think that everything can be reduced to relevance. So we said that communication for these scholars is all reduced to relevance. That depends on two aspects: contextual effect and processing effort. What does this mean? Contextual effects: adding new information, strengthening assumptions, weakening old information. So, according to these scholars, when we talk, we have to be relevant. And how do we do that? Through context. We should follow the same pattern to be relevant. Meaning, you add new information, Of course, when we talk, we're adding new information. We reinforce what we've already said, but at the same time, we weaken old information. I don't know if you're familiar with the ideas of theme and reme, but basically, even if we think about, remember when we talked about anaphora, and we said Mary and Jane are going to a party, Mary and Jane went to a party, they had lots of fun. First step that you do to be relevant is you add new information. Mary and Jane went to the party. Strengthening assumptions, well, or adding more information actually. Mary and Jane example is not the perfect one for strengthening assumptions, but they had lots of fun. They had lots of fun is actually strengthening the idea that if they went to the party, most of the times you have lots of fun. But when I'm using the pronoun they, I am weakening old information in a way, because I'm no longer saying Mary and John, I'm saying they. So communication, according to the relevance theories, is moving from new information, reinforcing information, to getting rid of old information. And that's how you build up communication. At the same time, if we want to be relevant, we have to take into consideration the processing effort. What does this mean? If we really want to be relevant, we have to allow the hearer to recover information with the minimum effort possible. Okay? Being relevant means that you start with something and it has to be relevant. You have to say more or less the same thing, things that are pertaining to what you're talking about. Because if you start talking about something, then you go back to something else, then you go to something else, and then you want to go back to what you were talking about previously, that is not going to let your hearer understand what you're saying, and you have the risk of being irrelevant. Okay? So this is why some scholars say that all the maxims can be reduced to the concept of relevance. Let's look at this dialogue. Well, there's a shuttle service, £60 one way. When do you want to go? At the weekend. What weekend? Next weekend. How does that work? You just turn up for the shuttle service? That might be cheaper. Then that's 50. In this case, when B says at the weekend, he is not specifying what weekend he wanted to go. He should have said something along the line of this weekend, next weekend, whatever. And we understand that B was too vague because this urges A to ask what weekend. Okay? And that changes the rest of the conversation. So with this relevance theory, there are some limitations. This theory does not consider cultural or social dimensions. It is, let's say that it looks more at language patterns, word patterns, than anything that is around the cultural, social context. Okay, it thinks of language as question, answer, or new information, reinforcing, getting rid of old information. It cannot be applied in everyday life. Then we'll talk about politeness next Monday. So, as for today, I gave you more thorough examples about the 4 maxims, both for floating maxims and violating them with an explanation. We looked at some limitations of the cooperative principle, and then I introduced the relevance theory that is based on contextual effects and processing effort, okay? So the pattern of new information strengthening assumptions and weakening old information, and at the same time the fact that you have to be relevant so that you can facilitate, that you can ease the hearer's effort to recover information. Now, I'm going to add a link here, and I want you to watch this video. I'll also put the link in the comment box so that it's easier for you to retrieve the link. Just a second, please. It is part of the class, so please watch it. And it's usual TED Talk, so it's about 17 minutes. And in this video, Steven Pinker reflects, he makes us think about language, the structure of language, of our language, and how these habits, the way we use language, reveals further things that are beyond and behind language. It's a pretty long TED Talk, but this is the first thing that we're going to comment on when we get back together on Monday. Okay. As for the recordings, I hope that you are watching them during the time that we were supposed to have a class, so that you can keep track. You can keep going with your classes, with your schedule. As you can see, I'm posting them some minutes before our class so that you have everything set and ready. You can watch your video, pause it to watch the other links that I give you, and then just send me questions if you need to. Now let me pause the recording just a second. Okay, so today's song is Lemon Tree by Fool's Garden. So I'll read the lyrics and then invite you to watch the video through the link that I'm going to post in the comment box. I'm sitting here in the boring room. It's just another rainy Sunday afternoon. I'm wasting my time, I got nothing to do. I'm hanging around, I'm waiting for you. But nothing ever happens, and I wonder. I'm driving around in my car. I'm driving too fast. I'm driving too far. I'd like to change my point of view. I feel so lonely, I'm waiting for you. But nothing ever happens, and I wonder. I wonder how, I wonder why. Yesterday you told me about the blue, blue sky, and all that I can see is just a yellow lemon tree. I'm turning my head up and down. I'm turning around. And all that I can see is just a yellow lemon tree. I'm sitting here. I miss the power. I'd like to go out taking a shower. But there's a heavy cloud inside my head. I feel so tired, put myself to bed. While nothing ever happens, and I wonder. Isolation is not good for me. Mamma mia, ma che canzone che avete scelto. Isolation, e io che l'ho proposto. Isolation, I don't want to sit on the lemon tree. I'm stepping around in the desert of joy. Baby, anyhow, I'll get another toy. And everything will happen. I wonder how, I wonder why. Yesterday you told me about the blue, blue sky. And all that I can see is just a yellow lemon tree. I'm turning my head up and down. I'm turning around. And all that I can see is just a yellow lemon tree. I wonder how, I wonder why. Yesterday you told me about the blue, blue sky. And all that I can see is just a yellow lemon tree. Speriamo che presto ce la faremo. Allora ragazzi, vi invito a guardare adesso il video che vi ho messo nel comment box e noi ci rivediamo lunedì prossimo al solito orario, 10:30. Fatemi sapere se ci sono problemi e niente, buona settimana. Keep fighting.